which created the Open Space and Farmland Preservation Trust Fund. Those two programs were encompassed in it, only farmland and open space at that time. And then in 1998, there were two separate ballot questions. One that raised the maximum tax collected, and the second, which created a dedicated improvement fund for the Park Commission for the improvement of their facilities. In 2002, another ballot question created the Historic Preservation Trust Fund program. And then in 2012, in response to Hurricane Irene, Morris County created the state's first flood mitigation program for the buyout of flood properties. In 2013, the following year, they opted to take a step back and evaluate all of the trust fund programs to see if there were ways that municipalities could use the trust fund in different ways. To chart its future direction, they commissioned a study, which I managed for the county, which involved interviews and surveys of all of Morris County's 39 municipalities, and also select nonprofits. A recurring theme that occurred throughout this whole process was trails. In fact, we had 78% of municipalities that were supportive of the trust fund for use of trails. And also 62% of towns in the county had post-preservation plans that included trails in some way. So in response to this, in 2014, the freeholders posed a ballot question to the voting electorate of Morris County, and it passed by a margin of 3-1. The program was up and running in 2016, and I have administered that program with Denise Chaplick at the Park Commission since its inception at that time. So as you can see, we have a lot of programs that fall under the Preservation Trust Fund. I'm going to now head on to our municipal nonprofit grant program. Just as a background, the purpose and intent of this program is to provide funds for the acquisition of land and water areas to provide or protect parkland and green spaces. That's why the fund is there. We are also looking to protect ecologically sensitive areas, and that includes wetlands, stream corridors, aquifer recharge areas, and steep slopes. And also provide outdoor public recreation, and that is part of our original ballot question, only outdoor recreation. Eligible properties include land and water areas for recreation and conservation. Shown here, ecologically sensitive areas, areas of scenic, historic, and cultural value, and passive and active outdoor recreation. What's key is the program does not fund structures, only fund the land. That is, of course, unless the site and the structure meets the criteria of the county's historic preservation program. Then it would be eligible through the open space program. And in order to meet that, it would need to be either listed or eligible for listing on the state or national registers, either individually or as part of a district. And something I want to highlight as well that hasn't really been taken advantage of too much in the trust fund yet, but hopefully it will be now that we have a trail grant program, is that you can acquire a conservation or a trail easement through the program. When you're building masses of open space and you may find that you only need a small segment to connect it, you can apply for a trail easement through the program. And easements are generally less expensive than fee simple acquisition, and this may be all you need for your objective. So that's something to remember that you can come to the trust fund for. Our summary to date, our first applications were accepted in 1994, and it's hard to believe we now have 25 years under our belt. We have a quarter century of success. And during that time, we've had 298 successful applications, awarded $199,474,721 in awards through the trust fund. And these have all been successful projects that have been completed. So that's quite a phenomenal number to show. Through that, we have preserved 15,223 acres in 36 of our 39 towns in Morris County. After 25 years, as you can probably guess, this program has the widest distribution of all those trust fund programs that I previously talked about. It's reached 36 of our 39 towns. In fact, we've had grants awarded in more towns, but they were not necessarily successful. To date, I believe Victory Gardens is the only one that has not received a grant and preserved land through it. Also, the nature of these properties, very varied. They range as small as a half acre all the way up to over 600 acres in fee was our largest, and over 900 acres in easement was our largest acquisition as well. And also grant awards, as low as $11,000, our lowest, to our record grant award to date of $10 million. Our average grant award is about $670,000. The freeholders have generously funded this program from its inception, as long as the funds were available for the collection of the tax. This year, our allocation is approximately $2 million. But I do want to point out, though, that there are other funds that are available, and as is shown on your sheet, should there be a need or a demand for it, dollars can be allocated if there's a pressing need. Here's a map which shows the distribution of the properties. The dark green properties show the Preservation Trust Fund properties, and the other brighter green areas are all other open space, be they municipal holdings, federal holdings, state holdings, nonprofit holdings, all of them. So, as you can see, the dark green areas are complementary, adjacent, in a lot of instances, to the light green ones. And that's great, because we're building preserved masses of land. Also, I'm showing preserved farmland on here in the dark brown, and as you can see, that too is complementary as well. Just want to highlight a couple of examples in recent years to also show we have large projects, we have small projects, we see everything in between, we still do. Untermeyer Lake, this is a project that was submitted by the Trust for Public Land on behalf of the Borough of Kinnelon. It's 2 properties, totaled 179 acres in 2016. Received a grant of $1.7 million. It's located at the Quantic border next to their Mountainside Park, so it makes a contiguous mass there as well. The Morris County Park Commission retained a trail easement for Walhall Mountain Greenway on this as well. 2 different properties that were preserved as part of this. One contains a very scenic lake, as you can see, and the other was a steep mountainous area with a trail that led up to the summit where it had a commanding view of the New York City skyline. Beautiful properties. In contrast, a much smaller property, only 12 acres. Cataract Park expansion, just a couple years ago as well. In 2017, Township of Washington received $52,800 to preserve this property to expand its municipal park near the Warren County border. It also governs the uses of the lands that are acquired through this and the restrictions on them. Morris County cites Chapter 24 as the foundation of its Preservation Trust Fund rules and regulations. The only sections I want to really highlight tonight of our rules are Section 2, the definitions, and Section 3.3, our Municipal Nonprofit Grant Program, under which you'll see details about our application form, submission requirements, review procedure, post-award requirements, anything related to the grant. It's covered in our rules in extreme detail. We always default back to the rules. And the rules, the full set, are available on our website. And the URL there is on your handout. It's on my card as well, which is in the back. Please feel free to take one. All right, now I'm going to move on to our recent rule changes, which is probably why a lot of you are here tonight to hear what is changing. Demolition. So, Public Law 2017, Chapter 154, which was adopted in July of 2017, amended Chapter 24, and it expanded the definition of acquisition. And I'll read it here. Acquisition or to acquire means the securing of a fee simple or lesser interest in land, including but not limited to an easement restricting development by gift, purchase, installment agreement, device condemnation, and includes the demolition of structures on, the removal of debris from, and the restoration of those lands to a natural state or to a state useful for recreation and conservation purposes. So now we have an expanded definition of acquisition per this new law. The stated intent and purpose of Chapter 154 is to eliminate any ambiguity in the use of county and municipal trust funds, of the use of their dollars for demolition. And it did this by equivocally stating it can be done. Implicitly states you can use those dollars for demolition. So there's no question about it that they can be. So with this new expanded definition, we needed to know how this impacted our programs. We sought County Council's opinion, who opined that since our trust fund rules are based on Chapter 24, and this expands the definition, our rules would need to acknowledge the change. However, it was at the discretion of each individual board if they would implement procedures for its use and implementation. So then this started discussions at our various boards. Open Space Committee, that's one of them, and also the Flood Mitigation Committee, because those are the two that are mainly affected by this. Flood Mitigation was first to bring this up, and I believe that was either in August of 2017. The first time it was brought to Open Space was in September of 2017. That's when the discussions ensued. For flood, it made sense to implement that change. The purpose of the flood mitigation program is to purchase flood-prone properties, to restore them to their natural state so they can serve their flood storage retention benefit. And a way of achieving this is to remove the structure. So it made sense for that program. Demolition of homes that are typically seen on there run $10,000 to $20,000. So that was something that made logical sense for that program. There was discussion as to this line here where it said, or to a state useful for recreation and conservation purposes. Well, what does that mean? That allows a lot of ambiguity, questionable area there. It's like, well, depending on what you want to use that property for, and suppose there's contamination present, that could render an acquisition or something quite costly. So in October of 2017, our rules and regulations were changed. The definitions were revised. Acquisition was revised to state what it is in Chapter 154 verbatim. And also restoration to a natural state was defined as grading the demolition site, provide topsoil, and seed with grass and or wildflower mixes. That was the limit of what we would call, that the county would call restoration. So during this time then, the Open Space Committee continued discussions into 2018 on this rule change. And mind you, we had a change in committee membership at that time too. Every year we do change some members. So it was ultimately in December of 2018 that a rule change was brought before the committee. And the majority of the membership believed that this was a natural evolution of the program in open space as well. There is less land to preserve in Morris County now. In fact, I believe we calculated a statistic of only about approximately 5% of the land is truly vacant, and it is scattered throughout the county. This is obviously less than it used to be. Allowing demolition of various sites, of structures that are on various sites, would be a way to remove unattractive structures and restore them to open space. There were other considerations though, because there are certain aspects that could be on an open space site that are not necessarily considered in flood. Flood, you're dealing mainly with homes. On open space sites, you could be looking at commercial structures that are quite large. And these could be quite costly to demolish as well, that they would even exceed the cost of the acquisition itself, the land acquisition. So that was something to bear in mind, plus all the different materials that you're likely to see, contamination, asbestos. So those kinds of discussions entered into the picture. The open space program has never operated on a reimbursement basis. Dollars were only given at the time of acquisition, so how would that occur? And also caps were discussed. So Ultimately, the rule that was put forward in December was adopted by the Open Space Trust Fund Committee, and they recommended adopting it, demolition and a restoration rule change. The Board of Chosen Freeholders approved that change that same month. So now it is on the books. I do want to draw your attention to this section of the rules, 3.3.7.1, the allowable project costs. So what is this going to cover? Allowable project costs for demolition and restoration of the property to a natural state under the open space program are limited to 10% of the eligible land cost, or $50,000, whichever is less. So there is a cap on it, there is, and it's only 10% of the eligible land cost.